Hello everyone and welcome to another game from the Superbet Rapid and Blitz tournament being played in Poland 2023. It is Wesley versus Richard Rapport, and this is their game from round 3. Now, one of these gentlemen is one of the leaders after day 1, but we are going to discuss this after the game. And also thank you everyone who mentioned in the comments of the previous video that I forgot to update the letter on the little robot below me. Sometimes it happens, but it's good to know that people pay attention to that kind of stuff. So that being said, let's check out the game. I went through all of the games that happened, and I thought you guys would enjoy this one the most. It's a real slugfest. So let's dive straight into it. There we go. Sorry about that. Let me just fix the board. Okay. So Wesley has the white pieces, and he opens with pawn to d4. We have knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to f3, and pawn to c5. So a bit of a different move order, but we will end up in a Benoni very quickly. d5, d6, we have knight to c3, e captures on d5, and we have transposed into the Benoni defense. c captures on d5, g6, and now bishop to f4. Now, this is a move that often troubled me when I first started playing chess, as Benoni was one of the openings that I started employing as black against pawn to d4, because I've started, watching some Mikhail Tal games where he played the Benoni, and of course he played very well, so I thought maybe I could play, fun chess like that. But after bishop to f4, it always seemed like, okay, now if I play bishop to g7, won't this d6 pawn just be a weakness forever? But the fact of the matter is, no, it won't. So just bishop to g7, and now pawn to e3. Knight to b5 doesn't do anything, because just queen to a5 check, and of course that's pretty pointless. You have to go back, and then your entire position just falls apart. And even if e3 was played, the knight on b5 was defended, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. So e3, we have castles, and now you might think, well, can't we do it just now? What is knight b5? We just go after the pawn, and how can black defend it? I mean, is black going to play a weird move like knight to e8? No, black will actually play something like pawn to a6, and that's it. Capturing the pawn is really bad for white. If knight captures on d6, you will play knight to h5, go after the bishop, who is defending the knight here, and after knight captures on c8, knight captures on f4, e captures on f4, bishop captures on b2, black's position is just better. Let's say rook b1, bishop c3 check. Okay, you will castle at some point with bishop to e2 and castles, but let's say knight to d7, you will capture on c8 with the rook, and after bishop to e2, rook captures on c8, let's say castles, and now knight to f6, you will also lose the d5 pawn, and only black can be better here. So that's why just pawn to h3, if some of you were wondering. And now here's a move that isn't played all that often. Usually black just goes knight to a6 to c7, and it does make sense, because one thing that the bishop on f4 does is prevents knight to d7 to e5 in some variations. Of course, this knight has to move for you to go to e5 with this knight, but if you play knight d7, then bishop captures on d6. That's one of the problems, and this can be solved in many different ways, but Ricci decides to go for knight to e8. And now the pawn is defended, and now you can play knight to d7 to e5. So let's see what happens here. Bishop to e2, knight to d7, we have castles, and just knight to e5. We have knight to d2, also one of the ideas when playing against the Benoni is just put the knight on c4. The knight will be extremely strong there, going after the d6 pawn, and it's sort of one of the objectives that you should achieve. We have pawn to f5, and now there is a game where bishop to g3 was played. Also knight to c4 is a known move, but Wesley goes bishop back to h2 first, and it is now, as of move 13, that we have a completely new game. So we have knight to c7 and pawn to a4, now controlling the b5 square. You don't want to see pawn to b5 on the board. We have queen to e7, and now rook to e1. We have queen to b3, bishop to d7, queen to b3, and now knight to a6. Rapport now offers the b7 pawn, and as this is a rapid game, he maybe feels that Wesley will not be able to capture it, because what if your queen gets trapped? But that's exactly what Wesley plays. Queen captures on b7, and he says, show me the danger behind capturing this pawn. And okay, Rapport plays knight to b4. Now he is threatening rook f to b8, but Wesley plays bishop captures on e5. And now the problem is, if you go for rook f to b8, there's a very tricky line here. bishop captures on d6. And now after queen captures, knight to c4. And now if you move the queen, then queen can just go to c7, so you can just trade. Let's say rook captures, knight captures, now attacks the rook. And if rook to b6 attacking the knight, you will just play knight back to c4, attack the rook. Now let's say knight to c2, forking both of the rooks, but now just rook e to d1. And after knight captures, you will capture on b6, a captures, rook captures, and white will be much better here. You are up 2 pawns, and of course, well, it's hard to say if you are winning by force, but you should be much better here. So instead, after bishop captures on e5, Rapport just recaptures, bishop captures on e5, and now bishop to b5. You've removed the defender of the bishop on d7, so now you want to go after it. We have rook f to d8 defending, and now rook e to d1, sidestepping the fork, rook a to b8, and now queen to c7. We have rook b to c8, attacking the queen, queen b7, rook b8, queen d7, and rook b to c8. And now Rapport is saying, oh, all right, are you maybe interested in a draw, good Sir Wesley? But no, queen back to a5. Wesley wants to continue fighting. We have pawn to a6, attacking the bishop, and now we trade captures, captures, and knight to c4, putting pressure on that d6 pawn. We have rook to b8, now stopping knight to b6, and knight to a2, offering a trade. And while you could just trade here, Richard goes for rook to a7. He defends the pawn, so now if the knight is captured, you don't have to worry about queen captures on a6. We have knight captures on b4, rook captures on b4, and now just knight captures on e5, trading everything off. Queen captures on e5, and queen to d8 with check. We have king to g7 and rook to d2. Now defending the pawn on b2, and okay, the pawn on b2 is attacked twice, but if you capture on b2, then rook captures, queen captures, attacks the queen, and once the rook moves, you could play this, but it maybe trades down a bit too much. So instead, rook a to b7 was played, just doubling up on the b file, and now queen to a8, going after the a6 pawn. Rook captures on b2, we have rook captures, queen captures, queen captures, attacking the rook on a1, and now just rook back to f1. And now, not defending on a6 with queen to b6, Rapport says, I'm going to start pushing my pawn right away. You can have the a6 pawn. So he sacrifices it. He plays pawn to c4. Queen captures on a6, pawn to c3. We have king to h2, getting the king off of the back rank. Usually it makes sense when someone is trying to promote a pawn to a queen. Pawn to c2, and now queen to c4. Of course, you have to guard the queening square, and now Rapport just plays rook to b4. He's trying to kick the white queen away from the defense of the c1 square. Queen to c7 with check, king to h6, and now a beautiful move, queen captures on d6. Sort of offering Richard to go for pawn to c1, but if you do this, then rook captures on c1, queen captures, and queen captures on b4, and white is just winning. So instead, we have rook to c4, now preparing pawn to c1, but Wesley just plays queen to f8 check, king to h5, and queen to e7. And now you have to repeat king to h6, and we end the game with a repetition. For example, king h5, queen to e7, and here we would have a nice repetition. The problem is, in the game, a pawn to h6 was played, and this is bad. And another thing, let's say you play pawn to c1 and just to bring a queen into the game. Look at this, rook captures, queen captures on c1, and now queen captures on h7 with check, king to g5, and now pawn to d6, and white just wins on the spot. The problem is, you'd think that white is trying to promote the pawn here because the rook cannot get access to the d4 square, but even if you play rook to c8 and you stop the pawn, there's the beautiful f4 check, and now after king to f6, you see the real reason behind pawn to d6. That, of course, is queen to e7 checkmate. So that's the problem. So that's why the only move to play here is pawn to h6, but Rapport plays an even worse move, and he plays pawn to h6 now, instead of king to h6, and now Wesley has a forced checkmate, and it's really a beautiful one. It's a forced mate in 7 moves, not an easy one to spot. Just a heads up, Wesley did not find it during the game because they were both incredibly low on time, but you guys, I imagine, are very comfortable in your own homes, enjoying some chess, so feel free to pause the video and try to find this beautiful forced mate in 7 while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this elusive idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to g4 with check. It looks odd, you know, starting. How would Wesley miss this? It's literally a check move. The problem is after f captures on g4, you don't recapture. You play king g3, and now there's the threat of queen to h4 checkmate, and the black pawn is preventing the rook from guarding the h4 square. So what happens now? Queen to b8 with check. Now you play pawn to d6. Absolutely incredible. And after g captures on h3, so the rook finally regains access to the h4 square, you play pawn to f4. Again, with the threat of queen to h4 checkmate, and now it's unstoppable. The only way to stop it is g5, but then queen to f7 is just checkmate. So absolutely incredible stuff. Wesley had no time to find it, but I hope you guys did a good job. So instead, he played pawn to d6. He started advancing his passed pawn, but this allows the Rapport a chance to bounce back. So pawn to c1 becomes a queen. Rook captures on c1, rook captures, and now pawn to g4 with check. We have captures with check, king captures, and queen to e4 with check. And now Wesley is down a full rook, but that pawn is very, very close to promotion. King to g5, queen to f4 with check, king to h5, and now pawn to d7. Actually, the way to win this is queen to f3 check, and I'm just going to show it because it's beautiful. Queen to f3 check, king to g5, and now king to h3. That's the way to do it, threatening queen f4 check, queen to h4 checkmate, and now after, let's say, queen to e5, stopping this, you just play d7. And there's no avoiding it now. If queen to e6 check, yes, you connect with the pawn, but just king g3. You're again threatening checkmate. There's no good way to stop this. And if you try repeating queen to e5 with check, there's even the incredible queen to f4 with check. And now after queen captures, pawn captures with check. So you will promote that pawn. You are within tempo. King to f6, and now d8 queen. And of course, white completely winning. But incredible stuff. They were playing on increment. They were a few only seconds on the clock. So d7 by Wesley, queen to d2, and now queen to f3 with check, king g5, queen to f4 check, king to h5, queen to e5 with check, pawn to g5, and now queen to e8 with check. Wesley now has his d8 square protected. King to h4, and now queen to e4 with check. The real move is queen to f8, as we've shown in the thumbnail, because from there you guard the queening square, you guard the f2 pawn, so you don't have to worry about queen captures on f2, and you're also threatening queen captures on h4 with check, followed by queen to h3 checkmate. So, I mean, queen to e4 check was played. Wesley repeats once, queen to h5, queen to e8 with check, king to h4, and now Wesley spots it. Queen to f8. Absolutely beautiful. There's just no defense against this. So rook to h1 was played. The problem is if you capture the pawn, of course, just queen captures on h6 check, king g4, and queen to h3. This wonderful checkmate. After queen to f8, rook to h1 check. Of course, Richard now has to give back the rook in order to avoid checkmate. Queen captures on d7, getting rid of the pawn, but now queen captures on h6 with check, king to g4, and queen to a6. Defending the pawn on a4, and now you're up 2 pawns in a queen and pawn endgame. Of course, you're winning. It's merely a matter of are you able to win it. So king to f3, queen to f6 with check, king e2, and now king to h2. You have to win the g5 pawn and start advancing your pawns without allowing black some sort of a weird drawing maneuver. So here, queen to g4 is actually still a draw, but a queen to h7 check was played. King to g2, now queen e4 check, pawn to f3. We have queen captures on a4 and just queen captures on g5. So now the two connected pass pawns will march forward. Queen a2, now comes pawn to e4. We have queen to b3, queen to g3, and queen to e6. We have pawn to e5. The pawns are now unstoppable. King e3, pawn to f4 with check, king d4, queen to f2 with check. King e4, queen f3 with check, king d4, queen g6. Queen to f5, and now queen to d1 again with check. King e4, queen f3 check, king to d4, king to g3, queen to g6 check, and queen to g4. You have to figure out a safe way to get your king off the board. Queen d3 check, queen f3. A couple of repetitions here, then king h4, queen h7, and now queen to h5. Queen e7 check, you run away, and now queen to f5. Another queen g8 check, queen g5, queen to e6 check, f5 now. And this is the way to advance. Otherwise, you would just have a repetition. But here, the problem is If the pawn is captured, then queen to f4 check forces a queen trade, and after captures and captures, the pawn will be protected all the way to the queening square. Let's say king to g6, king e7, king to g7, and the 3 squares needed to promote your pawn are defended, of course, completely winning. So after f5, we have queen to a2, but now just queen to f4 check, king to d5, and king to g5. The white king now marches up the board, queen to b2, f6, queen to g2, king to h6, and it was in this position on move 86 that Richard Rapport resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The one way the game could continue is, of course, a few more checks would be given. Let's say queen g2, queen g5, queen c2 check, king g7, queen c7 check, f7, and that's it. And now after you try anything, even a nice queen to d6 check will be enough for you to win the game, because you have to trade, and then of course the queen is completely winning. Really a remarkable game. As expected, Rapport always plays wild openings, and Wesley does not back out from a challenge. He did grab that b7 pawn. He said, "All right, show me the true secrets of the position," but there weren't really any, and Wesley just won a very nice game. And if you guys are interested in the standings after first 3 days of the Superbet Rapid tournament, Wesley, Levon, and young Krzysztof Duda are leading the tournament with 5 points. Then with 4 points, Maxim Vasilyev and Radoslav Wojtaszek, with 3 points Richard Rapport, with 2 points World Rapid Champion Magnus Carlsen, with 1 point Anish Giri and Kirill Shevchenko, and with 0 points so far Bogdan Daniel Deak. So there we have it. A very nice game. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see more incredible games being played today. 3 more rounds of Rapid will be played. I would like to thank David Kimura, AMD Reason Enthusiast Group, GolfSoftware.com, Paul Hinamund, and Gary Shaw for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this wonderful event and everything else that's happening in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.